Fantasy Baseball Q&A. It's Tuesday. It's 1 p.m. I'm Eric Samulski. I'm joined, as always, by James Schiano. James, Labor Day is behind us. We are in September. It is officially the final month of the fantasy baseball season, and we are grinding through to the end, trying to get people those titles.
Yeah, this is officially gut check time. Every single casual has checked out. We play real football in 2 days. So this is your moment if you want to make a run, if you want to do something crazy. It's right now or never.
Yeah, and there is still time to make a run. Obviously keep checking your standings, but this is not a situation where you need to feel like you're fully out of it. Like, we can still make runs for a lot of counting stats. We can still make some runs in ratios, not huge runs in ratios. And listen, maybe you don't win the league, but maybe you finish in the money. And those are still things that matter. So if you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitch, feel free to put the questions in the chat. We are going to go over as much as we can. Talk about some September call-ups. Probably going to talk a little bit about MVP up here on the top of the hour as well. So yeah, hit us up in the chat right now. We will get to all of those questions. I'm just going to ask you, James, you are a Mets fan. Is it Ohtani for MVP? Is it Lindor for MVP? What do you think?
I'm definitely really biased, but if the award is actually given to the player that's the most valuable, I'll always say Lindor, partially because I watch him every day, partially because he's the best player on my favorite team, partially because he put down one bad month, and since that bad month, he's been basically hands down the best player in the entire National League. Ohtani will have the best stats, and Ohtani's going to have the gaudy 50-50. I hope it's like 49-53, just so we don't have that one little milestone that voters will hang their hats on. But I don't know. There's something about the playing defense. There's something about what Lindor has done with this team, holding them together. And there's also a question that I don't know. I'll ask this to you. I asked this on my podcast this weekend, Metsed Up, to my co-host. But let's say like we're living in a fantasy world, and right now, the Mets, like let's say on June 12th, the Mets and Dodgers made a handshake agreement, and on that moment, Francisco Lindor and Shohei Ohtani just swapped jerseys. They just walked to the other side, and they're playing for each other's teams. Do you think either team is that? What's the difference in either team's record, you think, from that point on?
I think weirdly, like, the Mets might be worse only because I don't know who plays shortstop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that is the argument here, right? That Ohtani has the gaudy numbers. But if you're talking about valuable overall, then defense does factor into that, right? And a guy who's DHing all the time, even if he's producing really great offensive stats, is not contributing at all for half of the game. And so that is an element when you're talking about MVP. I also really reject the idea that the MVP has to be on like the best team. A player can be incredibly valuable. The fact that the Mets are even on the brink of a playoff spot right now is in large part due to Lindor. Now, Mookie Betts was out for a long period of time. The Dodgers pitching staff has been a little bit of a disaster. Yeah. Freddie Freeman's playing through an injury. So there are the similar arguments that like what Ohtani has done has kept the Dodgers in the spot that they are in. So it's not to diminish Ohtani's claim to this possible award. But it is just saying, like, I get the Lindor. I get the Lindor comment. I get the Lindor side of it.
And also, this is all moot. The Mets missed the playoffs. They can easily miss the playoffs. They're still on the outside looking in now on September 3rd. But the argument definitely comes from the fact that if he does almost, because the Mets lineup has, while it was really good in the first half, has dragged a bit in the second half. Pete Alonso's never really found his footing. Brandon Nimmo's been lost since the All-Star break. JD Martinez has taken a step back since the All-Star break. It hasn't been exact. Mark Vando's still been really good, but it just hasn't been what it was in those June, July when they were really blazing hot. It's been him fully dragging this team to the finish line, every single thing. And it's again, his offense, his defense, his base running, his leadership. He's watching him every day. He's in baseball nirvana right now. It's beautiful to see the way he's playing the game. But every single thing, he's 2 steps ahead. I don't know. I would love to see some recognition finally for what he's doing.
Has there been an MVP that wasn't an All-Star? Like, has a person won an MVP after not being an All-Star in the same season?
There's never even been
a wild thing to look up.
There's never even been an MVP in the New York Mets ever. It's been we're
Yeah,
60 years in here, 62 years, and he's never won an MVP. So again, it's also the same that like Lindor not being an all-star. Like, how could this guy have not been an all-star? How can he be playing this well for this many years and not get any recognition for the greatness that he causes? It's ridiculous. Maybe that's why like, I have that little bit of anger inside of me for him to win the MVP.
sure.
But
Yeah.
I don't. It's just again, bias every single day. He's doing just stupid things. And I love picking arbitrary dates. One of my favorite things to do in baseball stats, fantasy baseball
Of course.
content, everything
And people love it
for
when you do
sure.
that.
Since
Yeah.
June 1st, Lindor 300, 373, 556, Otani 268, 366, 623 slash. A lot more homers for Otani, but that slash not very different. WRC plus is the same, and Lindor is worth almost 2 more wins above replacement on Fangraphs since the arbitrary date of June 1st. Arbitrary dates. Also, since June
Yep.
1st, interesting, Jackson Chourio, 5th highest WAR in the National League since June 1st. Another guy who looks like he's doing things right now that gets,
Unreal.
getting close to an award too, which is crazy to say after the way his season started.
Yeah. Churio has been tremendous. And you really do have to kind of wonder where his ADP goes in 2025. We can have that conversation. It's still like if I'm just checking the updated NL Rookie of the Year odds. He's still plus
Yeah.
2,500.
Yeah.
Jackson Merrill has moved to minus 800. So Jackson Merrill
Somehow.
is the betting favorite. And obviously that has a lot to do with Skeens hasn't been as electric of late. Jackson Merrill has been great. And I think there's a natural inclination to reward the position player who's in the lineup all the time versus the starting pitcher who's not, and also didn't even debut until kind of like halfway through the season. And so I do understand that aspect of why Jackson Merrill is the betting favorite right now. And I don't necessarily disagree with it at all either.
Yeah, I think it's a frustrating part of these awards, but it's a true part of these awards that narrative will always come into it. It's just that's the way
Mhm.
they are. So it does feel like similar to the MVP, where like Lindor might have a better argument. Maybe that's more narrative than the stats. So, but Skeens has been. I still think Skeens should win the Rookie of the Year. I think there's almost no doubt of it. But Merrill's been so clutch and so instrumental to a team deep in a playoff run, as the Pirates have totally fallen apart. Not Skeens' fault, but I think if they were cruising and rolling right now and they were in this mix, the publicity around it would have him going. But Merrill's still amazing. I'm not taking anything away from Merrill, but I don't know. I think Skeens is having still a significantly better season.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. Speaking of having good seasons or the inverse, having bad seasons, Dad says Luis Robert has been less than desirable lately. Would you like the idea of dropping him for a more hot bat in the Roto playoffs? I'll use this as a little tease to say that tomorrow, James and I are recording the Rotoworld baseball show together, the podcast, and we are going to talk about schedule-based ad drops for the next couple of weeks, hitters and pitchers. We've talked about good schedules before. We're going to try to get a little more granular and talk about like people you can specifically drop. I don't know if Luis Robert factors in there schedule-wise, but performance-wise, I mean, in the 37 games since the All-Star break, he's hitting 200 with a 293 slugging percentage. He is striking out almost 38% of the time. He has just 3 home runs in 37 games. He does have 10 stolen bases in those 37 games. And that is where I'm saying that is the only thing right now where Luis Robert is providing you value. If you need speed, I could see holding on to Luis Robert because he has been running and bad teams do tend to run a lot. And he has the added value of like, unlike a Jose Caballero, who we know is going to run, but we don't really think has the skills to provide you much else. It wouldn't be shocking if Luis Robert had a hot 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the month of September. And in addition to running, put up decent production, everywhere else. However, if you're fine on speed, he's not giving you anything. And I don't think it's a crazy cut, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the thing that's scary about Robert, which is always kind of scary about him, is when he starts to lose his approach to the plate. And he hasn't really done that this year, even the last month when it's been very bad. But just watching him and this White Sox team day in and day out, there's a certain dejection from every single player on the
Yes.
field. Like you could see it on their faces, you can see it in body language. It's like he had a throw where they could have kept a 1-run game against the Mets over the weekend, and he spiked it like directly into the ground, and he just like looked back and like slumped his shoulders, and it's just everything around this team right now is horrible. It's filthy, it's disgusting. He's not. It's bad. Like I don't really want anything part of it. I would have trouble dropping him because, like you said, like if you need speed, usually right at this time of year, you need any speed you can get. He'll steal you a few bags, but I can't expect much more than like what you'd say is commensurate to like a 12th round player value the rest of the year, just to give like a ballpark of it in my brain.
Yeah, and that's so let's go over, let's talk about it from the standpoint of like who would you actually cut for him. So we'll try to get like a large enough sample size, but for hitters, I want hitters who are playing well. So we'll go to the Fangraphs player rater. We'll take the last 2 weeks, so nothing crazy. And I'll look at outfielders specifically. So like outfielders who, you could find on the wire who get swapped one for one. 20th ranked outfielder over the last 2 weeks on Fangraphs player rater, Trevor Larnach, hitting .333 in 37 games, 3 home runs, 11 RBI, 6 runs scored. You're dropping Luis Robert for Trevor Larnach.
No, I'm not. I want the speed. Larnach is giving me medium power with mostly everyday playing time, but I'd rather the chance of Robert just hits me 3 homers and steals 5 bags. I think pretty easily.
And Larnach will sit against all lefties, so keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
How about you want speed? How about Zach McKinstry hitting .464 for the Tigers in the last 31 plate appearances, 4 steals, 5 runs, 3 RBIs, 1 home run, multiple position eligibility. But he's Zach McKinstry. His offense is only slightly better than the offense that Luis Robert is in. Where are you going there?
I played this game with McKinstry over the weekend in a league, and I was like so back and forth on whether or not I was going to pick up him or Jesus Sanchez. And I was like, oh, Jesus Sanchez playing 3 lefties this week. I can't pick up Jesus Sanchez. So I did roster McKinstry, but it's mostly for that eligibility. I don't know. If you need an infielder, you could, I guess, convince me on that. The Tigers are weirdly hot, and McKinstry will steal you a few bags, but it's that just disgusting feeling inside your heart where you're like, Zach McKinstry can't get that hot. He can't get much hotter than he is right now. But I know that there's a world where Luis Robert can. And even with that, Luis Robert, statistically in all of baseball, has been one of the worst players since even August 1st to have a bigger sample size here. He's got basically the same WOBA as his teammates, Lenny and Sosa and Miguel Vargas. It's really bad. But in terms of heat, pure heat, what he can deliver, I still think over McKinstry, that's one you have to stay. I'll take just for power in a bat.
Maybe Uncle Ted is looking at the Fangraphs player rater because the 25th and 27th ranked outfielders of the last 2 weeks have basically identical stat lines. So Garrett Mitchell and Johnny DeLuca. They're both hitting .324. They both have 5 RBIs. They both have 2 home runs. They both have 3 stolen bases. Mitchell has 7 runs scored. DeLuca has 6 runs scored. Johnny DeLuca, Garrett Mitchell, or Luis Robert?
I might take the 2 guys over Robert. There's a chance of that. I don't know. DeLuca saved me recently in a best ball draft and hold. He's kept me in first place out of nowhere when I lost almost every single one of my outfielders. But the fact that those guys are also giving you the power speed that Robert can give, and then as just horrible, miserable as Robert's look day in and day out. I don't know. I love listening to Ian Kahn do stuff sometimes. If you guys are familiar with Ian Kahn, fantasy analyst, because he does a lot of fantasy scouting based on legitimately player body language, which I think is really fascinating. And I think it's something that a lot of people miss because a lot of us are just box score hounds. Like we're looking at the box scores every day. We're checking our stats. We're on Fangraphs, we're on Baseball Savant, we're on Twitter. But there's something missing when you don't actually see these guys every day. And seeing Robert play against the Mets this last weekend, it looked miserable. It was so bad. He looked so disinterested. And that's not a knock on him. He's playing the worst baseball team ever. But yeah, I don't know. This is a range where I would start to drop him when I'm getting similar stats and I can see some hotness from the other guys.
Yeah, and I think you're trying to also find the matchups, right? So when you're getting into that level, you could say, okay, who are they playing in this particular week, and who do I want to roll with? And you could kind of go with those guys in particular, kind of like a streaming way. Mm-hmm. Dad wants to know for the fantasy playoffs: Shea Langoliers, Austin Wells, or Miguel Amaya. I will say over the last month, all 3 guys are within the top 10 among catchers in the Fangraphs player rater. So really not a bad choice among them. I think if you want power specific, also weirdly, all three of them have exactly 4 home runs over the last month,
There you go.
which makes what I'm going to say seem weird. But I do think Shea Langoliers is your best bet if you want just power.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree
I
with that.
think that Austin Wells remains in the best lineup.
Yeah,
Yeah, probably with
definitely.
Jazz. I mean, with Jazz Chisholm back. But I was saying because the Cubs have been red hot. So
Yeah, scalding.
even though I think the lineup is better for Austin Wells, Amaya's in a really good lineup right now. And I do just want to point out, like, Miguel Amaya's swing change is connected to why he is hitting so well of late. It's not just like a backup catcher who all of a sudden got hot. Like, this is a guy who was a prospect of some note, not a top
Yeah.
prospect, but he was somebody that people liked, who made a swing change to get rid of a leg kick, to get his timing down a little better so he can get his foot down early, so he could get pull side power, so he could hit with a little more authority. And he has been absolutely on fire since the beginning of July when he did that. Over the last month in general, he's hitting 314 with 4 home runs,
Wow.
20 RBIs, and 13 runs scored in his 73 plate appearances. I, I get wanting to go Amaya here. I think Austin Wells is probably the safest option because he's been a really solid hitter overall for like the whole season. And I think Langoliers is your best bet if you just want power. But I wouldn't, I don't, I kind of would lean towards taking the gamble that Amaya is going to keep hitting like this.
I think similar logic, but different conclusion is I would still take Austin Wells from that group. And a big reason for that is this time of year, you have to hunt kind of lineup spots because every single at bat is scarce that you're going to have. So every single opportunity you have to come to the plate and get on base is another opportunity for a runner RBI that your opponents might not have. And as
Mm-hmm.
hot as Amaya has been, the Cubs have not moved him out of the 9 hole or the bottom of the order
Sure.
yet. Where as the Yankees have remade their lineup in the last few weeks, they've installed Austin Wells as the everyday cleanup hitter. So that's someone who's hitting after Aaron Judge and before Giancarlo Stanton, as Gleyber Torres is at first, Alex Verdugo's down to 9, Giancarlo's 5, Jazz is 6. It's become a very deep lineup, especially now with Anthony Rizzo back at 7, getting rid of DJ LeMahieu.
Ugh, don't
He had 2 hits. He has
don't
a career base.
congratulate
He's a
the
few extra base
Anthony
hits in
Rizzo
the last few
return.
days. Yeah,
Sure.
he's been doing better than DJ
Sure.
LeMahieu. This isn't fancy. We're talking
Yes.
Yankee
Well,
fans here.
that's true.
But
Yeah, that's true.
him hitting in the 4th spot every single day in that lineup, you're probably looking at 5 to 6 more at bats a week, and that might seem a little granular, but I think over 4 weeks, that's something that becomes really relevant if you're really trying to get every single stat you can and move up a board.
Sure, I get that. I understand that. I think maybe those are your two choices between the two of them. Light Blue Yoshi fan says, "Hey," and hey, what's up? Uncle Ted's going to segue us here, but you had talked about it before we started. But Pico Armstrong has also been on fire for the Cubs. Another guy who, despite really strong production, has not moved up in the lineup at all.
No.
Still hitting 8th, which again you could talk about with the larger fantasy relevance of a lot of his value. I mean, not a lot, but he scored 17 runs in 26 games in the month of August while hitting 8th.
Yeah.
If you're not going to move up in the lineup, I don't think the run totals are going to keep up. 6 stolen bases for him in August. He's going to run 314 batting average on a 333 BABIP. He will run a higher BABIP than normal because he's fast, and fast guys tend to run a higher BABIP. I don't necessarily believe in the power production. The 4 home runs he had in August, I don't think the power is really there in his profile yet. If you look at his scouting grades, he doesn't scout. He doesn't have pretty strong grades for raw power. He's somebody who his minor league career high is 20 in a season. So he's maybe a 15 to 20 homer full season bat. But if you need speed and maybe, he's not going to hit he's not going to hit 300. He's only hit above like 290 once in the minors.
Yeah.
So maybe he's a 270 hitter with good speed and on a lineup that's red hot right now. I like that. And we're talking about right now. We're not talking about who he's going to grow into.
Yeah.
But that's worth a gamble.
And right now, a guy like PCA that's hot, that's probably the most valuable thing. I got way too deep looking at the PCA stuff this morning for just no reason, just bored, browsing around Baseball Savant. He's done something cool in the last few months. I think I tried to look at some videos. I'm not the best trained eye in terms of hitting mechanics, but it seems like there's been a bit of a mechanical change from him. He had a huge hole in his zone high and away, which I think a lot of young lefties have that issue. He was doing a lot of damage on pitches middle in and high general. But once that high and away pitch, he tended to pull off it, hit a lot of weak ground balls, pull them. But since I think it was the middle of July, he has more barrels anywhere in the zone per swing, high and away in the strike zone. It seems like he's just done better to close that up and find a way to differentiate between those pitches high and away, because he's also found a way to lay off and take more of those pitches. His swing rate has gone down. His barrel rate in those has gone up, especially per swing and per pitch, which I like looking at barrel rates there because they'll stabilize a little quicker. They have a little bit more of a sample, but it does seem like there's been some genuine changes happening in PCA where there's an adjustment that's been made in a bat to ball area where he struggled mightily both last year and the beginning of this year before he's come back up and before he got this really consistent playing time. So I think that there's a real thing happening at PCA right now that's causing him to be a significantly more productive player. And that's relevant now. That'll be really relevant next March. I think if his draft slot doesn't jump up super, super high, because he's someone just from watching these last few months, I'll definitely be targeting, but he's a really interesting hitter right now in a lineup that is suddenly surging.
Yeah. And listen, we're talking about the surging lineup. Look, over the last 14 days, Pete Armstrong is the 7th ranked hitter overall on Fangraphs Player Rater. Amaya is the 10th. They do face the Yankees this weekend, and they get the Dodgers next week. And I understand both of those teams have rotations that have, a little more question marks maybe than we're used to. Is Garrett Cole going to pitch on Sunday with his calf cramp? I mean, I still think probably, but we'll see as the week goes on. It's possible the Cubs get a little colder, in the coming games against those two really strong World Series contenders, and we'll adjust from there. But those two guys have been good. They're worth adding. They're some of the only guys who were available on waiver wires who are within the top 30 players on Fangraphs Player Rater. Dansby Swanson, 3rd overall on the Player Rater the last 2 weeks. He has been great. Another big name here, Jhonkensy Noel, Big Christmas.
Love.
The 20th ranked player on the Fangraphs Player Rater over the last 2 weeks, hitting 295, 12 RBIs, 10 runs scored, 4 home runs. Look, he can crush fastballs in the zone. He is not great with off-speed pitches, and he will chase out of the zone. Those are things you're going to have to deal with. But he has legitimate power, and he's going to he's gonna, if somebody makes a mistake, he's gonna make him pay.
Yeah.
So I get it.
He also he has been great against sliders this year, weirdly enough. He's a positive 7 run value in sliders. 5 of his how many home runs? 5 of his 13 home runs this year against sliders. So I guess that's probably just hunting hangers, which is, again, if that's something you can do, that's definitely a skill. But he's another one where I don't know what I'm going to think about Jhonkensy Noel in March, but right now I love Jhonkensy Noel, and I've tried to get Jhonkensy Noel on every single team I can because there's playing time, because no one else in the lineup has power. He's just simply hot, and when he seems locked in, he's doing a lot of things really well right now, and that team needs him to stay this hot if they're going to stay atop that division.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, they were easing him in because of the swing and miss, but they need his bat. They need his power. Lane Thomas has kind of fallen off. Lane Thomas has totally fallen off, and Stephen Kwan has struggled a little bit. So who knows? I also we got to talk about Kyle Manzardo. Manzardo's back up. Maybe he's another guy who gets a shot now, because they do need a little more juice in the lineup. He had a 2-homer day after coming up. I don't know that you're going to see that kind of production continue, but why not, right? Why not give him a chance? Why not see if from the left side, we can get a little more juice in the lineup of late? So who knows?
And Josh Naylor has been a little banged up. He's playing through, I think it was a hip or a knee or something, but he says he's going to play through it. But the Guardians really have had a gaping hole DH this entire year since the David Fry torrid hot streak in May stopped. So there's no reason that Manzardo, if he hits, will not consistently be in this lineup. Like there's still
Yeah.
Lane Thomas still playing every day as he should be. John Kenzie's in the field every single day. Naylor's hurt. Like there's opportunity, ample opportunity here for him to make an impact.
Yeah. And look, if Lane Thomas had a really good last 2 games, it's 2 games. I'm not going to read too much into it, but if he can keep it going, that'd be awesome for them as an offense. And they still got a shot at this thing. So, we'll see how it all plays out. Dad asked a funny question. Mid-season, someone traded for Manny Machado and Jeremy Pena, sending Mark Canha, Clayton Kershaw, and Mackenzie Gore. At what point of the season do I call the police? Listen,
that's crazy.
A couple things I'll say. When you say somebody at midseason made this trade, not sure what Mackenzie Gore's stats were at that point in the time, but remember that for a long period for a lot of this season, we were talking about the Mackenzie Gore breakout because he was a former top pitching prospect. He looked really good to start the year. He had made noticeable changes to the use of his fastball, the fastball velocity, how he was using, as Nick Pollock referred to, the Blake Snell blueprint, right, of fastballs up, breaking balls low. So there was a time where Mackenzie Gore looked like a breakout star for a lot of this year. He has fallen on his face hard.
Yeah.
But if a trade like that was made like June, right, that's not as egregious a trade at the time. Obviously, the hindsight being 2020, right, changes our look at a lot of these trades. Jeremy Pena is like a fine deep league middle infielder. I don't think he's particularly great. And look, like, I just think depending on if a team is trying to win, right? If a team is making a move and clearly trying to compete, like, we got to give it the owner a benefit of the doubt and try to manage his or her team as best they can. Maybe that person thought Clayton Kershaw was going to come back and be the old Clayton Kershaw. It's probably not good process, but yeah, they're trying, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. It doesn't seem like the Mark Canha bit of it is a little weird to throw in there, but I could see how he thought he was getting 2 upside left-handed pitchers, and maybe they didn't need the offense. I don't know.
Same time of year, I was drinking the Mackenzie Gore Kool-Aid hard. He was throwing those high fastballs, and I was like, "Oh my god, it's really happening!" And I traded Adames for him, just flop right there, 1-for-1. The whole league was like, "Wow, what a great trade you guys just made!" And now I look like an idiot. I really missed the boat on that one. My team had tons of hitting, and I needed pitching. I thought it was going to work out, and Gore's been at least a little bit better of late. But also, this is a good lesson for everyone that when we have stars that are still under like 33, 34 years old, just wait and trust. Like Manny Machado was always going to get it together.
Sure.
He's Manny Machado. Like I maybe that sounds foolish, like watching the season Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt just had, but they're a little bit older than Machado. The situation is a little bit different. Machado is going to be someone who's a borderline Hall of Famer. He's going to be one of the best baseball players a lot of us are going to see in this lifetime in terms of like consistency, in terms of both sides of the ball. Like he's a freak. He's amazing. So it was always going to happen. It's just the way that happened felt a little bit scary in that moment. And that happened with Austin Riley in June too. And Bregman. I'm trying to think of some other guys. I mean, of course, Seager started cold, but I'm not going to say that. Even the guy like Eugenio Suarez,
who's kind of still going
through now
fell
apart. He's a little older. He's a tiny bit older than those guys. So that kind of changes that. I think 33 is like that age cutoff. I feel like, Saris talks about that. Maybe I've heard Jeff Zimmerman say that too. Where like once you get to there, then you don't know anymore. Same with like George Springer, because who's even bounced back in a bit of a pretty impressive way, but still not all the way. Eugenio Suarez has been one of the most productive power hitters in baseball since the beginning of July, and he looked unplayable. He was about to get cut. Blaze Alexander was getting playing time over him in June. Like it just happens sometimes to the veterans. It's like this game is so long and it's such a war of attrition. You have to just stick with it. Even let's say you decide to take a flyer on Jeff McNeil in the middle of the summer. Jeff McNeil has been awesome. He's back to hitting about 300 with even a tiny bit of power since the beginning of July. Like it just happens to these guys who've been around for a while. You just kind of have to wait on it sometimes.
Yeah. Speaking of, the inverse of guys who have been around for a while, Uncle Ted is talking about Jose Tena as a must-add all righties this week. Dude crushes righties. Listen, I think he's an ad, even with the idea of the righties up. Like, he's playing regularly in the Nationals lineup. In 17 games since coming over to the Nationals, hitting .339, 2 home runs, 7 runs scored, 9 RBIs, 1 stolen base. He was hitting well in the minors for Cleveland as well. In the Cleveland organization, he was hitting .298 with 17 homers and 14 steals in 90 games in AAA. It hadn't carried over to Cleveland in terms of major league production. And it didn't, he also had a great stretch in the minors last year, and it didn't carry over in major league production, but he's just 23 years old. So yeah, like, I don't know that you're going to get a game changer when you add him, but I'm totally happy to add a player who is a young player who's playing every day and putting up decent results on a lineup, especially that's going to let him run. So yeah, I've added Jose Tena in a few places. In 15-team leagues, I've added Andres Chaparro where I need a corner infield because you got minor league production there and an everyday role. And so these are guys you got to take a gamble on at this point in the year, rather than keep throwing in the same guy who maybe you had early in the season who's kind of petered out. Like, take the playing time, take the upside. And then if you need to, make a change after a week or two, if he falls off, then fine, make the change.
Tena's also funny because it's kind of an obscure, oddball approach where he doesn't swing and miss very often, but he still finds a way to strike out like about even a hair above league average. And you look at his strikeout rates and his chase rates, swing strike rates in the minor leagues, and this wouldn't look like such a back control, contact oriented guy like he's been so far in the majors. So it's definitely a chance that Jose Tena just has a week where he stops making contact maybe for a little while. He starts actually finally swinging and missing, which he hasn't done much yet. But again, end of the year, take a shot, ride these guys, ride a hot streak, look at the schedule. Like, that's a great look by Uncle Ted there, seeing all of those righties on the schedule. Similar to a guy like Jesus Sanchez, been blazing hot. It looked like he was going to have another great week. 4 out of 5 lefties to start this week for Jesus Sanchez, someone who just in a vacuum almost can't be rostered in a situation like that. So just every time before you make a move this time of year, you have to look at the schedule. It's so valuable and so important.
Not just this time of year because we need these decisions matter, but also this time of year because now these teams have extra players, right? Because of the September 1st call-ups. So if you're able to roster extra hitters, you're able to roster guys who, like, maybe I have, a righty bat who only is really good against lefties, who was not really wasn't on the roster earlier in the year because he just wasn't going to play enough, and they kept a guy in AAA, and now he's up on the major league roster. And so, okay, this is the guy who is now going to play far more regularly because he's on the roster and they can use him. It doesn't matter that, they had to bring him up. Somebody a little bit like we've seen Emmanuel Rivera start 3 of the last 4 games for the Orioles. We thought he was just going to play against lefties. He started the last 2 games against righties. Now part of that is probably just riding a little bit of a hot bat, right? He went 2 for 3 with a homer and 3 RBIs in one of his starts. It was in Colorado. That got him an extra start, 2 for 5, 2 RBIs. So, they may let him get a couple of games and see how that's going before they, we all keep waiting for Kobe Mayo to knock down that door. But Emmanuel Rivera is a guy who, maybe doesn't play all the time, but now gets more opportunities because it's an expanded roster.
Yeah, it's always kind of looking out for guys like that. They come seemingly out of nowhere sometimes, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like, these guys have just changed my standings and done something ridiculous this fantasy season. And so a lot of times it does come from those teams that we'd consider worse because they have significantly more opportunities. It's just keeping eyes everywhere.
Yeah, you got to know when things happen. You got to keep an eye on, shifts in production, playing time. I know another guy that Uncle Ted has talked about a few times today, but like Santiago Espinal playing pretty much every day in Cincinnati now. We've seen him be relevant for short stints with the Blue Jays in the past. Since the All-Star break, he's hitting .398 in 27 games, 3 home runs, 3 steals, 15 RBIs, 12 runs. Like, that is production in deeper formats that is helping you for a guy who can play various positions, and again is playing every day now that Heimer Candelario is out in an elite offensive ballpark. So yeah, I mean, like, those are situations that you need to monitor, and you have to be open to, like, then that may change, right?
Yeah.
He may have his playing time taken away, and you just can't hold on at this point in the year. If a guy starts losing playing time, move on. We don't have the time to wait and see if he can get back into the lineup.
No, because there is no such thing as waiting and seeing anymore. It's like a guy like Henry Davis, who everyone loved, and then he was terrible, and he comes back up. People start to like him again. Still stinks. Like if you thought there was anything in his profile that made you like him then, that stuff probably hasn't changed now. So if you still had an idea that if you were willing to have a roster spot, grab a catcher to do something, then you have to kind of be like, all right, I know it feels ugly and I feel like I've been burned by this before, but just try. You might get hot again. Like similar to, I think, one of your favorite guys, Lawrence Butler, in the last few weeks, because he went blazing hot and he started to peel back down again. People are like, all right, the hot streak's over. This is it. Lawrence Butler's done. And now what does he do? He hits like 6 home runs in a week again. Like you just have to ride these guys through some peaks and valleys. You can't just be like, he's not hot, move. He's not hot, move. Like there's something in between everything that we're saying, but it's still about like trusting the things that the way you evaluate these players originally, because it's not a lot of time left, but it's still like you can ride a peak and valley to get a guy to get the production that you believe they will have.
Yeah, and also like there's a difference between hot streak is over, but he was still in the lineup and hitting first every day.
Yeah.
Right. He hadn't lost his playing time. They'd continued to give him the opportunities. And that tells us something where we can start to say, okay, if the team believes in him and he's going to keep playing, and I believe in the overall talent and the ability, then like, yeah, I think that is worth holding on to and seeing. Push back on something a little bit. Uncle Ted brings up like Nathan Lukes is already leading off for the Blue Jays. Like we need to see longer sample sizes, right? Lukes has been up for 3 games. He hit eighth, and he hit first in a game where the Blue Jays rested George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Yeah.
So the only time he hit leadoff is in a game where the top 3 batters in their lineup were not in the batting order. But see, Nathan Lukes has started 3 straight games for the Blue Jays since coming up from AAA. And maybe that has us thinking, okay, lefty hitter started 3 games against right-handed pitching when he came up. He may play regularly against righties from here on out. But we want to see more than 1 game before we're thinking that it's in the leadoff spot. But again, that's still value in terms of playing time.
Yeah, the Blue Jays are one of these teams right now that's ripe with opportunity to find players that can contribute a lot, because I think how bad they were in the beginning of the year changed a lot of people's premonitions of what they were as a team and as a lineup. They've been slightly better than league average to the lineup in about a 500 record going on 2.5 months now. So this team is probably playing closer now to how they were perceived in April before that cold start. And you have guys like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as having one of the best seasons of his career. It's very comparable to 2021 when he nearly won. Did he win the MVP? Yeah, no, he didn't win the MVP. Shohei won. I don't remember who won the MVP actually.
Is it very comparable? I mean, there's a massive gap between 48 home runs and 27 home runs.
Sure, but I'm talking about the rate stats. In fantasy, it's not comparable.
Sure.
But in terms of like his production, his value, he's doing things right now that he hasn't done since then. And the league offense is a little different now compared to then too.
Yes, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is doing kind of what I think a lot of people thought he would do as a career. Yeah. Like he is a 300 hitter or better.
330
who's going to hit 25 or 30 home runs.
Yeah.
And not run. And that's who he is. That's what he's doing. And that's great. I just think we were too long. We're chasing those 48 home runs. Yeah. But this is what we should expect from him. He is really good. Not 48 home run power, but really good.
Totally. But end of the day, like he's carrying a lineup right now in a way that he's on base all the time. He's doing special things. So then you look at trickle down effects in that lineup, and you've seen Ernie Clement and Spencer Horowitz be breakout stars for the last 2 months. I say stars really lightly. Those are like 10 homer, 10 steal guys who have been productive assets. But then recently you've had the heat of Nathan Lukes, Will Wagner, and I think Leo Jimenez, who's been pretty good lately. Mm-hmm. Addison Barger has found a power stroke. He's had a lot of extra base hits. I think 4 homers in his last 10 games. Even Alejandro Kirk, back from the dead, 2 years in the doldrums, is now suddenly hitting a little bit. So there's a heat to this Blue Jays lineup right now that you probably thought would be the way in April. Wasn't that way for 4 months. And now it's looking like they could be a team that just hits better than maybe you or your league mates are expecting the rest of the year. So it's a lineup to sneakily be involved in that you probably could find some value in, because I'm sure a lot of these players wind up being available. And a lot of these guys have multiple position eligibility, which is really important this time of year too. So you can kind of consolidate roster spots, pick and choose, keep streaming pitchers that you want to stream, and make sure you have max flexibility at all times.
Yep. I fully agree with you on that one. Let's see if there was where is it? Roy. Roy says Shohei is breaking MLB records every time he hits a home run or steals a base.
Yeah.
MVP.
Yeah, maybe. Best stats. He definitely has the best stats. By far. By far the best stats in the National League, Shohei Ohtani.
He does have great stats. Ken Rosenthal pointed out that no primary DH has ever won an MVP award.
Never.
It does say the Baseball Writers Association of America instructions, however, make clear that pitchers and designated hitters are eligible. They also state, quote, there is no clear-cut definition of what most valuable means. I do think it's funny that they're like, hey, there's no definition of what most valuable means. It's like, you could put some sort of parameters into it, like specify that it doesn't have to connect to wins or whatever. But yeah, listen, he's the sixth 40-40 player in history. I get it. Is he putting up such a ridiculous season that he will be the first DH to ever win the MVP? I don't know. I really don't. Like, he might get there in the end, but I think if the Mets make the playoffs, I think people will be more inclined to vote for Lindor.
I also think that Lindor probably has to get over a certain threshold himself of some stats just to make it look better. Like he might need to hit 11 home runs in the next 28 games. Like he might have to get to 40 homers. I don't know if that's entirely possible, but I think that would help him tremendously to do that. I don't know if he can. I'm also looking at the other 40-40 guys. I'm just did a quick stat head search. Like I don't think Alfonso Soriano won MVP when he did in 2006 because that team was miserably bad.
He didn't. I can tell you right now, 2006.
Yeah,
it was Justin Morneau.
Okay, there we go. So Justin Morneau just stealing everything in 2006. The home run derby and the MVP. Barry Bonds, 96. I'm pretty sure that was an MVP for Bonds, but I'm not positive.
Canseco, 96 was actually Ken Caminiti.
Okay, so another 44. He didn't find a way to win MVP. Canseco in 88. That doesn't seem like he would have won the MVP there.
He did. Canseco 88 did win the MVP.
And then A-Rod 98.
A-Rod 98. No, that was Juan Gonzalez.
Okay, so in terms of guys 40-40, and last year Acuna, of course, did win the MVP. But that was also a similar debate between him and Mookie Betts because it was the guy who was shortstop. And Mookie had the narrative like he went and decided to play shortstop when the team needed a shortstop, which I thought was pretty cool. But the 70 stolen bases was special. But we're not even hitting over 50% with 40-40 guys winning MVP awards. So I don't know where.
And those are guys who played the field.
Yeah, and that no DH has ever won the MVP. So I'm excited to see how this winds up. I'm going to be at Citi Field tonight. And I'm going to be chanting MVP every single time Francisco Lindor comes to the plate. Every single one.
Get it. James will be there tonight. MVP every time for Francisco Lindor. We'll see if he can get it. We'll see if the Mets can keep winning. As a Red Sox fan, I hope it doesn't happen tonight for you. But then eventually it can happen again. But we'll take a little pause from the winning for a second. But yeah, Francisco Lindor, it is going to be an interesting race down the stretch. We're going to do a little bit of award stuff on the Rotoworld podcast in the weeks coming up. We'll bring on some of the betting guys, but I think there's some interesting, observations or races. I think that we talked about the NL MVP. We talked about the NL Rookie of the Year is a little interesting. AL Rookie of the Year is a little interesting. I think people still think Colton Cowser is the odds-on favorite, but is he a lock? Is he a shoe-in? We'll kind of see how that all goes. The AL MVP, Bobby Witt and Gunnar Henderson, and there's Aaron Judge right there. Obviously, a bunch of names in there. So yeah, we'll discuss all that on the Rotoworld Baseball Show coming up. As a reminder, James and I will be recording the Rotoworld Baseball Show tomorrow on Wednesday, so that episode will be out wherever you get your podcasts. Sometime on Wednesday afternoon, we'll look at hitters or pitchers you should pick up or drop. Make sure, tell your friends, come back Tuesdays, 1 p.m. We are going to still be here. I know there are fewer and fewer people really locked into their fantasy baseball leagues, but if you're here, we can help you be the ones who get over the hump, win that money, win your league, whatever it is. So pick up the best keepers for you to hold on to for next year. Happy to answer any of those kind of questions. So check us out again next Tuesday at 1 p.m. On the Rotoworld Baseball Q&A. I'm Eric Samulski. You can find me on Twitter at SamskiNYC. This is James Schiano. You can find him on Twitter at James_Schiano. As Uncle Ted says, get that money, everyone.
Get that money, everyone.